Hello, everyone. My name is Aysha Massell. I'm with Sustainable Conservation, along with many of my colleagues here today. I'm really pleased to present three guidance documents that we've been able to work with the Department of Water Resources. So I'll just go launch right into it. So Jenny Marr worked with us from DWR, and her intent really was to show what on the ground recharge really looks like. There are some folks like Don Cameron who have really been at it for a long time. And part of our efforts were really to try to get new people into the fold, new geographies, so that people can start to see what their neighbors are doing and start to encourage some, inspiration locally. So these are some examples here of new recharge sites this year. A couple there on the left and on the upper right are up in Turlock Irrigation District. And then down below on the bottom right is down in Chowchilla Water District. So like I said, these recharge project sites were kind of all over, mostly in the San Joaquin Valley. We had a couple up in the Sacramento Valley. That's something where folks are getting more and more interested up there as well in recharge. So the first document I'm going to go over is our Recharge Methods Manual, and this is really specifically about on-farm recharge. Its purpose is really to gather information from growers to growers, and so our target audience really was growers, districts, and GSAs. And it has a range of information that we're able to gather from our over 10 years working on recharge with growers and districts, as well as information from this year's events, which was really interesting. So the first is really, if you're a grower and you're interested in recharge, the first order of business is really to find out where your water is going to come from. And that's typically from an irrigation district. So we provide some kind of context on that of what are some questions you might want to ask your district if you're interested in a recharge, whether they have a program, and what you can do as a grower to assist if there is no program currently in place. There's also some questions about water rights that are not really all that relevant at the grower level, but are really good context for you as a grower to understand, okay, when will water be available? Will it be available? And then an additional, this year had the executive order, which has this whole other source of water that's now kind of more clearly available for folks. And so part of this district guidance, the grower guidance really focuses in part on recharge on perennial crops. We've heard there's a lot of information out there. The Almond Board of California has produced recharge guidance for almonds, but we also looked at grapes, pistachios, walnuts, and alfalfa, and give some tips and tricks for how to avoid any damage to crop health when conducting recharge on those crops. There's also the potential of putting recharge onto annual crops. And in this category, we also include fallow fields. Maybe you have an orchard that you're waiting for a few years before you replant. So it's kind of like fallow fields, or during an annual crop fallow season. There's also basins that are at the grower level. So, individual growers could actually have, small basins on their fields, as opposed to maybe the more typical district basin. We also have, excuse me, I don't have my glasses, so hard to see. What's the fourth bullet? Apologies for this. What's that? Too many, it's too many. One person. Ditches. Oh, in Sacramento Valley, there's what we're finding is a lot of the recharge is happening on ephemeral streams, and we're learning a lot from those folks up there. So recharge looks different in different places. We heard yesterday from Andy Fisher, for instance, on the Central Coast. Again, recharge looks really different on the Central Coast than in San Joaquin or Sacramento Valleys. And then finally, cover crops is really interesting. We're super interested in this aspect. There needs to be more research for understanding how cover crops interacts. Thank you. They're making it bigger for me. So how cover crops actually can help to infiltrate water. And also what we're really interested in is how cover crops might help to scavenge some excess nutrients before doing recharge events. And so what are those interactions? That's a, to be determined future work that we're working on, but we touch on it in this document. Okay, yes. The next part of this document is about practical methods on how to prepare your field, whether it's, perennial crops or annual crops, or maybe even recharge basins. And so just kind of how you get water onto a field, the infrastructure and the conveyance that's necessary, and then also preparing the field itself to be able to move water. You could put in temporary berms, you could do alternate row inundation, and then just some tips and tricks on how to manage your water during an actual recharge event. Another part that we cover here is kind of the costs of recharge. What we have here, pretty small on the screen, is a study by M Cubed back in 2016 on a typical, let's say, 160 acre field, the costs associated with putting new infrastructure on that field, as well as the cost of running, personnel to run the actual recharge event. It does require people to be there monitoring, moving the water around. And then those costs annualized over the course of a certain amount of years. So folks can kind of try to gauge how much it's going to cost them to do recharge events. And finally, what I think is a really awesome part of this particular document is 10 case studies of folks doing recharge on the ground. Like I said before, we have been working with folks for about 10 years. These are growers that have established their recharge sites, but then we also included some new growers that Rogel Rogers here in the back was really instrumental in finding those growers and working with those growers to try to get recharge done, for the first time ever for them. One of them you heard from yesterday, Christine Gemperle, and this is actually her site, I believe.
Recording in progress.
And then the other kind of aspect, and so for these case studies, we gather data on site conditions, like what's your soil suitability, the water source, the infrastructure that was needed in order to make sure that water could get onto the field and move around the field. And then we took actual, data from the growers on the amount of water they applied, when they applied it, how long, and we did some calculations on what we estimate to be the recharge amount. For the older growers, or the ones that have been doing recharge longer, including Don Cameron, he's featured in 3 case studies here, actually. We have a lot more data. We actually have some monitoring stations there that measure salinity and oxygen. And so there's a lot more data in some of these case studies that I find fascinating, and I encourage all of you to kind of take a look and delve into it. We also have a lot more data that we did not present in this document. And so for any of you researchers out there who are interested in crop health in particular, who want to really dive into some real actual numbers, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. So the next, I just have a few more minutes. I have 2 more guidance documents that we produced this year. One is our district recharge program guidance. And again, this is gathered data from many years working with districts and growers. And its purpose is to really provide an integrative, holistic approach to districts who might be interested in developing a recharge program. And so we've gathered information from a lot of different areas and also added our own flair, I guess you would say, to it. And our target audience is really irrigation districts, GSAs, and consultants that work with them. Oh, can someone move that forward to the district recharge program guidance slide? All right, great. Yeah, I'm not sure why they're not linked. Go to the next. There you go. Perfect. So this is actually a pretty long document, and we're going to be working on it to make it a little bit more visually accessible this year, but it's got a lot of content in there. So if you're interested, I encourage you to take a look. One of the primary things is to really, as a district, and as community members within a district, to really decide what your recharge program goals are. I was thinking earlier when we were looking at the AEM data, I mean, there's just going to be so much data out there. We're going to be able to really get very specific on where we recharge. And so the all important point is really to decide what are we recharging for? So where are we recharging to do those particular goals? So for instance, you could want to, as a basin, want to, improve your water supply for agriculture. And you could also target recharge to, let's say you have community drinking water wells that are going dry. You could actually target recharge very specifically to go and improve those water supply wells. Maybe you have some subsidence areas. With recharge, when you're targeting subsidence, it's really about recharging the aquifer above the subsidence zone, but you're basically providing like an alternative source of pumping. So you might want to do that. You might have some groundwater dependent ecosystems that you want to put water there in order to supplement the ability of that ecosystem to survive. And then, of course, we've heard a lot today about flood risk reduction, and I think that's a real potential area that we could really get into as a community. The Flood-Mar Network is really understanding the flood risks and how doing recharge could reduce flood risks while also improving our water supply. So there's many different ways. There's also, in terms of where districts want to go with this, again, I should have brought my glasses. Thank you, Daniel. Just call it out. Understanding water rights, all important. We've heard about that before. There's also different types of water sources that are also to be explored, and then really looking into, obtaining new water rights is kind of almost a last resort because it does take a lot of effort and attention. You also want to look at your program design. How are you going to do outreach to the growers if you want to include on-farm recharge? How are you going to compensate them for types of recharge? Are you going to align your recharge goals with other regional plans? I mean, you have to, right? With flood plans, with any kind of watershed management plans, all of these things have to be integrated. And then, of course, there's the program implementation. And then also in our document, we outlined some examples of success. And so our key messages to irrigation districts and from irrigation districts is maybe think about multi-benefit recharge prioritization, thinking about all the different aspects of what's going on in your basin to try to really get at multiple benefits at once. And then also minimizing unintended consequences. So there are water quality aspects. We've done some work on that. I have some documents here I'll have available for folks to take a look at about water quality and how to protect water quality while doing on-farm recharge. And one of those districts' success you've heard about yesterday from Aaron Fukuda. They have some, first starting with the groundwater allocations, then the incentives to kind of mitigate those pumping restrictions. And then also they're also including a recharge basin to improve one of their community drinking water resilience. So that's kind of getting into the multi-benefit aspect of where districts could go. And then finally, I just want to say this is a much shorter document. It's a recharge incentives and strategies document. And it's really looking at the suite of kind of real life examples that are out there in terms of what are districts doing this year? What did they do this year? It's not complete. We're still going to be working on this, but for now, I'll just show you a couple of results. Districts tend to have, different ways of approaching recharge incentives. So you can have land fallowing programs, groundwater pumping allocations. You could have, name a couple out, Daniel, that I can't see. Yeah, so instead of a groundwater pumping allocation credit, you get a surface water bill credit if you do a certain amount of recharge. There's a whole suite of different ways that districts can shape their programs. And one of the interesting things here is you'll see there's a lot of green in the northern part of the San Joaquin Valley and a lot of blue in the southern part, and that has a lot to do with water availability. And so I guess the take-home message here is there's no one-size-fits-all. Districts can kind of learn from each other, take examples, and share information. And this document is one way to get that going. And so I'm just going to end with, you can get all these 3 documents and many more recharge resources from the floodmar.org website, which you'll hear about later. And I encourage you all to download it, take a look at it, and also stick around after lunch because there's a lot more wonderful presentations and work being done. Thank you so much.